Hey folks, how you doing? Sluggo is back with you live. Three things I want to talk about tonight. First, who is General Kenneth Cruiser Wilsbach, the new Chief of Staff of the Air Force? I know a little bit about him because my last F-15 ride at Kadena was a cruiser in the front seat. A great American. And let me give you a little bit of his background. Also, B-21 testing and the revelation that it may have an air-to-air role. Isn't that fascinating? How would it do that? And so I want to talk a little bit about that. How would an airplane that is a bomber and is fielded as a bomber do the air-to-air thing? And then we're going to talk about collaborative combat vehicles. Okay. Andrew, welcome. Wayne, welcome back. Shark attacks and tossing bays are back. Okay, I understand the shark attacks. Tossing bays are back. Wayne, what does that mean? Not quite sure. Let me fix the camera here a little bit. We're a little lopsided tonight. And I also want to kind of explain, where has Sluggo been the last little while? And I think you guys will get a kick out of some of the things that that I've been doing. At the Military Influencers Conference down in Atlanta, met some amazing people. But this past weekend, Little Spanish Fork Airport had an amazing air show with a PBY Catalina. When was the last time you saw a flyable PBY Catalina at an air show? A P4YB, which is the maritime version of a B-24, a B-25 and a B-17 and a C-47. Pretty crazy stuff. Okay, so let's get right into it. First things first. General Kenneth Cruiser Wilsbach has been nominated by the president to become the new Chief of Staff of the Air Force. Those of you that don't know, General Dave Alvin, is leaving 2 years early into his assignment as a Chief of Staff of the Air Force. Very unusual for that to happen. Fogelman left early. There has been others that have left early. But Dave Alvin said, October 10th, I'm out. So the Air Combat Commander, Ken Wilsbach, has been nominated by the president to become the new Chief of Staff of the Air Force. I know him personally. My last flight in an F-15 tub at Kadena was with Cruiser in the front seat. And if you have my book, there is actually a picture of his hand adjusting a mirror as we're coming up to a tanker. I'm taking a picture through his seat looking up at the tanker. He is probably one of the smartest people I met in the Air Force. There's only maybe two other people that are in his league when it comes to how smart this guy is. Supreme Eater, welcome. Good to see you. I have not seen that yet, Wayne. I'll take a look at it. Is that the one, Wayne, from the 13th and 14th of last year? If that is true, yes, I did see that. and maybe we'll talk about that too, since we're going to talk about B-21s and their air-to-air role. Back to Cruiser. He was a distinguished graduate of the college he went to in Florida. He and I competed at the same time for major. He made major 2 years below the zone. He has literally been a distinguished graduate at every school he's gone to include distinguished graduate at weapons school. Remember what I said? One of the smartest people I've ever met. He is a warrior's warrior. And I know that is, that's kind of gauche and kind of cliche-ish, but let me tell you, I am happy that Cruiser is in the Chief of Staff of the Air Force seat. His background, Pacific. Spent a couple years at Kadena, then became the aide to the PACAF commander, Pacific Air Force's commander. Was JoJo welcome? JoJo, that's debatable. Depends on how you train. Then Cruiser went back to Kadena as the 18th Wing Commander, the Shogun Wing. He was the PACAF General for Requirements and subsequently the PACAF Commander. Welcome, Crazy. So his experience and forte are in the Pacific. And Trump doesn't do anything without thinking through it. And Cruiser, General Ken Wilsbach, has all of this experience in the Pacific. North Korea, China, and everything else that goes on over there. So I knew when I was a captain at Kadena that Cruiser was going places, that he was going to be in the upper leadership of the United States Air Force. And I've told all of my friends for several years now that General Ken Wilsbach will become Chief of Staff of the Air Force. And today that was announced. And you have a general with a lot of experience in the Pacific. There's two generals that I know. One of them has since retired, though. That was Mike Minahan. They both had a lot of experience in the Pacific. Like I said, Cruiser flew at Kadena in the BATS, the 44th, was the BATS weapons officer, a graduate of the weapons school, worked on a lot of things there when I was there. And then, like I said, he was on the rocket on rails to become a general officer. And all of us knew he would. All of us knew he would. So now you have a general officer, 4-star. I forgot. And he was the numbered Air Force commander in Alaska. So he's got a lot of experience when it comes to the Pacific region. And I think I know that President Trump, whatever your politics are, whether you like him or don't like him, he knows the right people to put around him. And Ken Wilsbach, Cruiser Wilsbach, is one of those people. And I can't be happier for Cruiser and his wife, Cindy. Maybe some of you saw the video that they made when he was leaving Thanks, Wayne. Maybe some of you saw the video that they made of his Finney flight at ACC in an F-22. His wife, Cindy, was there. And did any of you happen to notice Cindy was wearing a red, white, and blue shirt, but she had something monogrammed on one of the sleeves that a lot of feminists would just absolutely lose their minds. And what it said, and I stopped the video twice to make sure, did I just see what I just thought I saw? On the shirt that she was wearing, when Cruiser had his last Finney flight at ACC in an F-22, she had monogrammed, I can't remember if it was in the left sleeve or the right sleeve, Cruiser's chick on her sleeve. Folks, these are great people. I've known Cruiser since the 90s. I've seen him several times since then. Not run into Cindy a whole lot, obviously, but he is going to be a great, great commander for the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. And I know right now, the biggest problem that probably faces General Ken Wilsbach is readiness. Readiness. We don't have enough pilots. The supply chain of parts to the jets and to the airplanes is busted. And there's a lot of issues that need to be solved. And folks, I think they need to be solved quickly. Ranger, that's why I'm saying, whether you like him or not, this choice is a great choice to become Chief of Staff of the Air Force. A really great choice. He is a no-nonsense, punch you in the face while he's patting you on the back kind of warrior, all right? He'll probably ask me, Slogo, what does that mean? All right? What that means is when it's time to work hard, Cruiser works hard. When it's time to play hard, Cruiser plays hard. And I cannot, I don't know the words to tell you folks how highly I recommend General Wilsbach as the new Chief of Staff of the Air Force. This is a very good thing in my opinion. And again, we know he has a lot of experience in the Pacific. If you want, go Google his name, General Kenneth Wilsbach, Wilsbach, and look at his bio. All the schools he's gone to, and most of the schools he's gone to, he's finished as a distinguished graduate. Not only can he fly the jet, not only can he employ the airplane, but he's got the smarts for it too. So hats off to Cruiser. I wish I could be out in DC when he takes over, okay? I'm glad to see that. But now you have a general officer leading the Air Force with a lot of experience in China. And I want all of you to remember something that happened, a memo that General Mike Minahan, the AMC commander, put out where he said he expects to be at war with China by the end of 2026. And if you have been keeping up with what's been going on over there, there has been a lot of incursions in the Taiwan flight information region and a lot of things going on over there. So, yeah, glad for my friend, but, but Wayne, I'd say I'm glad for the United States. and our allies. Okay? Because this is a really smart guy who has, I believe, been groomed to become Chief of Staff of the Air Force. So that's good stuff. How many of you saw an article that came out, I think, in the Air and Space magazine, the Air Forces Association magazine, that said that the B-21 may have an air-to-air role? A bomber with an air-to-air role. And recently you had an F-22 take the longest AMRAAM shot in history. We still don't know how far it was. 100 miles? Who knows? But hey, Tommy, welcome back, brother. The longest AMRAAM shot from an F-22 in the history of that particular missile. And folks, again, having gone through weapons school and gone through all of the briefings on how that missile works, there's a reason that the call sign or code word when it locks on is Pitbull. And they're looking at the B-21 having a potential air-to-air role. How many missiles will it carry for air-to-air? Don't know. How many collaborative combat vehicles will it have with it? Don't know. But there has been some people writing about how it's a two-place airplane, two pilots in the airplane. Well, I'm assuming they're pilots. Maybe one's a combat system operator, although I doubt it. All right. That has the capability of potentially carrying a lot of air-to-air missiles and have collaborative combat vehicles like Anduril's Coyote and things out on the wings. Because I mean, again, take a look at a war in Taiwan. If you had a vehicle, a manned vehicle with, I don't know, 4 to 8 collaborative wingmen, all carrying air-to-air missiles, and we'll say the collaborative vehicles are carrying 4 missiles each, and then the B-21 is carrying, oh, for heck's sake, let's just say 16. That is a very, very dominant force. People would argue, is the AMRAAM really the best missile in the air-to-air arena? I would say, yeah. Okay. Gwendolyn, Dan Kane Raisin is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So General Wilsbach, as the Chief of Staff of the Air Force, actually will report to him. He is one rung up the chain as the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. Gwendolyn, does that help you understand that? Anyway, back to B-21 air-to-air role. And who is it here? Somebody just mentioned, Supreme Eater just mentioned, yeah, the B-1. They've talked about that for a long time. You know, how many AMRAAMs can you put in a B-1? And Supreme Eater, as far as I know, they never tested that capability on a B-1. They never fired AMRAAMs, launched AMRAAMs from a B-1. I shouldn't say fired. Launched AMRAAMs from a B-1 that I know of. And Supreme Eater, if I'm wrong, please tell me. All right. But I think what you're going to see, folks, is you're going to see some amazing capability with this new B-21 Raider. The second airplane has showed up and is now undergoing testing at Edwards Air Force Base. They've got 2 airframes that they're doing a lot of ground testing with, and they've got 2 airframes that are now flying. And as far as I know, folks, everything I've heard, it's going swimmingly. It's going very well. Now, there were some recent pictures of the second B-21. And there was a lot of, shall we say, arrays on it. Radar arrays, ECM, who knows? But as I was looking at the skin of the airplane, and there are some really good pictures that were published of it, it's probably got an active electronically scanned array, a ESA radar, just like you have in the F-35, the F-22. And you have to remember, those are active and passive sensors. So there's times where that radar is dormant and it's just kind of listening as well as watching. And you have to remember, it has each little cell is like its own little mini radar. All right. Yeah, Wayne, you're absolutely right. Okay. You know, the Rapid Dragon and the C-17, C-130s with the B-21, you know, launching air-to-air missiles or directing collaborative combat vehicles to launch missiles. That's a really interesting combination, isn't it? But back to what I was talking about, the B-21, as I was looking at, you know, all of you, I think I've told you many times, I used to build plastic model airplanes, a lot of plastic model airplanes. As a matter of fact, I've got a closet still full of them over here, you know, in front of me, behind the screen here. And so I took a very early interest in what is that panel and why is it there? What is that pylon? Why is it there? What is it doing? B1's classic, you know, has a new pylon. It has a sniper pod on it. I can't imagine the B-21 not having some type of infrared capability, laser capability. I mean, yeah, we're going to GPS guided weapons. So GPS guided weapon are doing some pretty cool things. Okay. What are you doing, Wayne? You're building a KC-135A model right now? That's funny, if that's true. Anyway, you know, it having a infrared camera on it, you know, like a sniper pod, obviously a laser for laser designating, some way of finding and seeing a laser spot, those kinds of things. I can't imagine the B-21 being built and not having that, and not having some really spectacular type of low probability of intercept, maybe even no probability of intercept type of active electronically scanned array type of radar in it. Also, AI that's driving the electronic countermeasures and the ability to find electrons that are painting them, or even electrons that they've been sent out to find. Because you got to remember, sometimes at the end of the, you know, that electron chain is a target. And you now you've got 2 people inside of this bomber aircraft that is capable of obviously doing air-to-ground missions, but now they're talking about air-to-air missions, and they're also talking about it flying as a collaborative combat vehicle with other airplanes around it that are using AI to help them solve problems on the battlefield. And one of the things that I read this week, and those of you have seen the Androl short that I did, they're saying that if we're going to battle the Chinese in maritime or invasion of Taiwan or a maritime fight, we'll need lots of cruise missiles. And I've posted 2 different shorts just recently, and I want you to go look at the one by a company called Co-Aspire. And the cruise missiles that they've created through 3D printing. Now, the gentleman who is the CEO of that company, his name is Doug Denny. His call sign is Boog. Boog was the squadron commander of VF2, the bounty hunters, when they were flying F-14D models off the Constellation during the Second Gulf War, and was fortunate enough to also be the squadron commander when they transitioned from F-14Ds to F-18F 2-seat Super Hornets. So he has some very unique experience, and he's created this company to try and create a very low cost, low observable, long range cruise missile. And they're 3D printing some of the parts. They call it RACM. Rapidly Adaptable Affordable Cruise Missile is what it stands for. So go see the short that I did on that one, okay? JJ Dunn, no one cares. No one cares about what? Just curious what you're talking about here. So Androl has their low cost Barracuda. The 100 can be launched from helicopters. 300 and 500 can be launched from airplanes. F-35s, F-15EXs, F-18 Super Hornets. The 500 has, I think it was 580-mile range and travels at 560 knots. I mean, that's incredible, okay? Good evening, Michelle. Good to have you with us. And the thing about the Co-Aspire RACM is it's the size of a Mark 82 500-pound bomb. They wanted to be able to make it small enough so you can carry a lot of them. Oh, excuse me here just a second. I promise, Wayne, no chewing on ice cubes tonight. And the other thing I was thinking about too, the B-21 is the new ARGM, Advanced Anti-Radiation Missile. And there's an ER version of that has like 80-mile range that the Navy has been using over in the Red Sea. There is a number of missions that you can now put on the B-21. And folks, with artificial intelligence, the ability to carry smart weapons, I mean, really smart weapons, be able to park one of these things on the eastern shores, shooting over the top of Taiwan in an air-to-air or air-to-ground role, is pretty spectacular when you think about it. Really spectacular. So I think you're going to see some really amazing things coming in the next little while. Things that we have seen in movies, like Firefox, things that futuristic books have written about, that are now seriously going to be used in combat. But you have to remember, it's all about the soldier on the ground. How do we support the soldier on the ground? We haven't had our troops fired upon since June of 1951 by enemy aircraft. None of our troops have come under fire from an enemy airplane since 1951. I don't know of a country that can say that. We're putting to bed an airplane right now, the F-15, that has 104 air-to-air kills and has never been shot down. What an incredible feat that is. So, man, when they made the F-15, folks, they made just a phenomenal airplane. I've been fortunate enough to fly in it 3 times, and when all the systems are working the way they're supposed to work, it's incredible, the situational awareness that you have when you go into an engagement with 4, 8, 12, however many airplanes, particularly when you have the E3 Sentry AWACS with you, the RC-135 rivet joint, the electronic vacuum cleaner on the battlefield. I mean, some really incredible stuff. And we've only gotten better. Oh, I had a fascinating conversation with, sorry, the sun's going down here. All right, hang on. Let me fix the lighting here real quick. I'm starting to get a little dark in the background. All right, much better. We had a big thunderstorm that went through, and all the fans that I had in the window got blown out. Okay. It brings out your beautiful green eyes. You're starting to scare me, Wayne. Michelle, you asked a really good question here. If you'd like to go down this rabbit hole, do you believe better weapons bring us closer or further from conflict? Michelle, that's a great question. I mean, a really, really great question that causes you to have to think, okay? And in my opinion, again, Michelle, this is just one each sluggo's opinion. I think it takes us further from conflict. We have interviewed numerous, just take the F-15 for example. Andrew, welcome. There have been a number of Russian pilots who have defected or have spoken about America's combat capability. One guy said it's so hard to fight against the Americans because they don't follow their own doctrine. which I thought was pretty funny. But many of them have talked about not wanting to go up against an F-15. And I've told you before on this program, on this live, a 4-ship of weapons school graduates, say on the opening night of some major air campaign, is like trying to get through a chain link fence at high speed. Yeah, Shadrach, Warthog, don't even get me started on that. It'll just make me start crying. There are a number of people who have said going against the Americans is like trying to run through a chain link fence. That's why, and I want you all to remember this, okay? And I'm going to put it here in the notes. All right. It's called unrestricted warfare by, I'm going to slaughter their names, so I'm not even going to put them in here. It's by 2 communist Chinese Air Force colonels. All right. And I can't remember their names right off the top of my head. All right. But I'm going to put this in here. And shoot, maybe I need to do a podcast about that. I thought I did. I did something about this. The 15 modalities of war. And Tommy, I want to roll your question in with what Michelle just asked about does it take us closer or farther away? Because I want to talk about that very thing. Like, we are in a Cold War with China. I honestly believe that. But the Chinese don't want to come up against us. The Chinese and the North Koreans know that if they try to fight us conventionally, they're going to get hammered. And I don't care how much bravado, I don't care all the things that they say. Yeah, we've got the new, what is it, J-57 stealth airplane. You know, it looks like a fighter flying Dorito of death. Hopefully some of you have seen the pictures of it. I'm going to do a short on it here, probably tomorrow. But right now, nobody wants to take us on conventionally. And that's both a blessing and a curse also, because you have to maintain that razor's edge. And it's hard to do that. When you have a political climate that basically restricts how much money you can spend on training, because you have to remember everything hinges on what the budget is. All right. There was a time when we trained hard, and they gave us money to come up with unique ways of training, like off-station trainers. Okay. Andrew, you've never heard that term? That's the term they use, the B2. The B2 is the Dorito of death. Anyway, so I think we've gotten better. Unfortunately, we've gotten better at dealing death. Unfortunately, too, folks, we've gotten better at the humanitarian thing, too. We've had a number of really interesting humanitarian relief operations that we've done, and we've only gotten better and better. Like using kill box procedures to find people on top of their roofs during a hurricane or a typhoon, things like that. But back to your point, I believe that our technology and training and our budget has kept us from going into war for the last little while. Now, I understand we did the whole global war on terror, and I think a lot of us understand now from things that are coming out that we made a lot of mistakes. And I think one of those mistakes was we didn't have a strategy. And folks, you can't go into any type of conflict without a clear strategy of what does it look like when we win, and what are we going to do to our adversary once we win. And I don't think that was very clear. As a matter of fact, I know it wasn't, particularly in Afghanistan. Oh, let's just go get bin Laden. Okay, well, hang on a second. If we go get bin Laden, do we go after the money? Do we go after the infrastructure? Do we go after his foot soldiers? Okay. A foot soldier battle is going to take years and years and years, like it did. How are we going to leave, and in what shape are we going to leave Afghanistan? And as you can see, we left it in kind of a mess. But if you go back and you look, who was it? I think it was Victor Davis Hanson that had a podcast that he did on this, where he says, we are already in a Cold War. We're in a Cold War with Ukraine and Russia fighting each other, and NATO not wanting to expand into that conflict. Thank heavens. And then you look the other way, you've got the Chinese, and a lot of people are saying they are approaching parity with us militarily. And that's a problem. And remember, folks, these four things, they're called the elements of national strength. It's diplomatic, informational, military, and economic. That's the framework that the U.S. government uses when they're kind of evaluating how strong is a country, diplomatically, informationally, militarily, and economic. Informational means, can they get up in front of a stage like at the UN and actually, wield some power by words. All right. So Andrew and Michelle, I think our weapons have, particularly recently, have kept us from going into another war. But at the same time, Victor Davis Hanson says we're in that like 1936 through 38 time frame where the Japanese and the Germans are starting to rise at the same time. And that's a little scary. You don't know what the Chinese will do. What happens if we get them backed into a corner? What happens when you get any enemy backed into a corner? And here's another one, folks, I want you to go find too. It's called the National Security Strategy of the United States, or as we call it, the NSS. That's where the president and his team say, this is what we're focusing on. And in the news, they've talked about there's 21 things that he's been kind of focusing on. So I do not know if the Trump administration has published a national security strategy for his second term, but I know he did for his first term. So go back and look at that one, because he's probably thinking in similar concepts. So go take a look at that. The national security strategy of the United States is telling you literally where the president's head is and what he sees are his priorities for American national power, the elements of national power, like I mentioned, diplomatic, informational, military, and economic. The United States economic machine is just massive, folks. And when you take all the restrictions off of it, it runs pretty smoothly and efficiently. Particularly if you take taxes off people. Shadrach, was that NSS published by Trump, or was that published by the Biden White House? I'm just curious. Okay. Oh yeah, Wayne. And Wayne, you bring up a really good point. Okay. The United States is unique in that we can literally move a city. And a week and a half ago, I was in Washington, D.C. Actually, I was at Andrews Air Force Base, Joint Base Andrews, for their air show. And as many of you know, I'm on the Gail Halverson Candy Bomber Foundation. And I spoke twice, Saturday and Sunday, giving the history of why did we have to do a Berlin airlift. And I want you to think about this, and I've probably mentioned this before. The Air Force's very first conflict that it's in the Cold War is a humanitarian relief operation that air power won. And strictly air power, okay? Strictly air power. With C-54 Skymasters, C-47s a little bit, some of the British airplanes, French airplanes, they were all involved. All three nations were involved. They delivered 4.6 billion pounds of cargo at 20,000 pounds a flight on the C-54 over a period of about 15 months. And that's the only way that we were able to save Berlin, was the blockade blocked all the roads, rail, and water accesses into the city. Stalin says, we'll just starve them out and they'll come to us. And he also miscalculated, saying Americans won't do anything. They can't do it. And we proved him wrong. 4.6 billion pounds in four-engine propeller-driven airplanes, 20,000 pounds at a time. The Berliners, who were out of work, were offloading the cargo, 20,000 pounds of cargo. They could clean the airplane out in about 8 minutes. I mean, just a crazy story, okay? And I've been involved in other humanitarian operations. We've used drones to search for people, vehicles, where the land masses are messed up, the roads are messed up, and we've been able to bring in humanitarian relief supplies into places like Haiti and particularly when they had those tsunamis in the Far East. Turned the Abraham Lincoln into basically a helicopter pad, and we're bringing people aboard and fixing them up. You have to remember, you got everything from corpsmen to brain surgeons, and the ability to take people into some really modern facilities you'd normally see in a hospital and fix them up. All right. Gregory Bradley, welcome. I've not seen your name before. Is this your first time here? Korean-Asia wars always said being overweight is not acceptable in the Air Force. He went in at 160 and passed 160. It's the way he was so proud. Him Security Service, Homestead, Florida. Oh, good. I joke with everybody. They ask me, well, how long ago did you leave the Air Force? Oh, about 30 pounds ago. I don't know what it is you leave the Air Force. And, I kept working out in the gym 4 or 5 days a week, for a very long time. But man, when you're in business development in a company, they expect you to pay, serious money. I had my boss tell me, okay, quit trying to save money here. Okay. You're in business development. All right. Take them to the best steakhouse and, and, and buy them, bottles of wine within reason. All right. But see, I don't drink. Okay. You could tell me wine, Chardonnay, and I would know the difference. And you just eat. But anyway, when the military does humanitarian, we get it done, and we get it done right. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Wayne. All right, so let's talk about collaborative combat vehicles for a few moments, okay? The first thing that comes to mind is obviously, how do you command and control an unmanned aircraft out on the wing? That, of course, requires a secure data link system, which could potentially be vulnerable to attack. It requires artificial intelligence, and of course, how do you write that? What kind of Chat GPT prompts do you put in? I need you to look for, let's see, SA5 Gammons first. They've got 170-mile range. Then let's go with the SA2s. They got about 24 to 30-mile range. I want you to prioritize them based on this route of flight that the strike package is taking into, I'll just name a city, Pyongyang. There's a lot of stuff that goes into that. There's a lot of mission planning that goes along with that. Second thing, weapons. What kind of weapons are you going to put on these things? And now we're seeing this cruise missile race, which is very fascinating. Lockheed, Boeing, Anduril, Co-Aspire, everybody's getting into this thing with some pretty unique and pretty special technology and techniques and procedures for employing these things. Imagine a scenario where we're going into a city like Baghdad on the opening night of Shock and Awe, and you have, we'll say, 6 B-21s, and each of them are controlling 6 collaborative combat vehicles. They're loaded with everything from Barracuda 500 cruise missiles to the advanced anti-radiation Argam missile. And literally they just spread out in front of their command and control vehicles and go and do what they do. The risk of losing someone, not there. The risk of losing an aircrew member really isn't there. And you have these aircraft on some type of artificial intelligence net. And I say net because the battlefield changes so quickly when warheads start going on foreheads that you have to be able to adapt. All right. Adapt and overcome. That's going to be a really fascinating battle, folks. Let's say it's not a city. Let's say, here's another scenario for you. You find a surface action group, a Navy surface action group, like the Akagi, Akaga, Soryu, and Hiryu, excuse me, aircraft carriers coming at you. And now you're in a maritime scenario. And you sink ships by going through them. The weapon goes through them, causes the airburst bubble under the keel, and just basically snaps the thing in half. But in a Pacific battle, you have literally millions of miles you have to survey, recon, and figure out what's out there. They always say in the Navy, the first one that radiates dies. So now you've got ships that are running literally emissions MCON out, okay? Shadrach, good question. Is the USA going to start building warships again? Yes. That is one of the things that the president has said we need to start doing. We need to start creating better warships that have artificial intelligence as part of their forte. The ability, like I mentioned, the first one that radiates dies. Well, how are you going to find targets, find, fix, and finish targets? What methods are you going to use to do that? You have numerous types of weapons that you can use, all the way from satellite guided weapons up to, this Anduril Barracuda. I hope you folks understand a broad area maritime engagement like we saw in World War II in this day and age is really tough. That's a very, very tough battlefield problem. Because of, as they say, the tyranny of distance, millions of miles, square miles of ocean, and the air above it, and the water below it. Because remember, in a maritime environment, you have to look at below the surface, on the surface, and above surface. Yeah, Wayne, the underwater threat has always been, I think, the prioritized threat. Not allowing a submarine to get within 200 miles of an aircraft carrier. D-Life, love your comment. Don't agree with it. Real enemy is within. But D-Life, let me come back to that. Let me change what I just said. I do agree with you partially. Because who's here now? Who, enemy-wise, is within our borders in the United States now? They've just declared a domestic terrorist organization. Many people thought they should have done that a long time ago. And what does that mean now that you've identified them as a domestic terrorist organization? What tools, diplomatic, informational, military, and economic, can you use in order to, quote unquote, defeat that domestic terrorist organization? And for lack of a better term, how do you know when to cease fire? How do you know when to stop? Does it mean everybody in that organization dead, in jail, turn their hearts and minds? So, D-Life, you have a very good comment now that I think about it there, okay? How do we deal with the enemies that we have inside the United States and their ideology? Go look at what's happening in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and the mayor's race in New York. 10 years ago, would we have thought that we'd be dealing with something like this? Yeah, Wayne, that worries me too. Okay. These cells that have the ability to launch on our bases, particularly tanker base. Did all of you hear last night the tankers were heading east again? Yeah. And I've told you guys before, all of you, I want you to remember, when you see tankers moving, something's up. When the tankers moved, I think it was within 48 hours, B-2s were going to Iran. And unfortunately, that's a very telltale sign that something's about to happen when you see tankers moving. Now, the tankers could also be refueling C-5, C-17s that are carrying troops. They could be refueling C-17s and C-5s that have Rapid Dragon in the back of them too. You have to think both, how do we use kinetic? How do we use non-kinetic? And how do you lash those two things together? And again, that's where diplomatic, informational, military, and economic come into play. We had annexes to the war plans that I worked on that had what we call flexible deterrent options that were diplomatic, informational, military, and economic. If you were to go to Google and type in diplomatic flexible deterrent option, or FDO, see what it comes up with. Some of them are really fascinating. You know, we've always heard going to the UN, and you know, the best example, of course, is Adlai Stevenson during the October Cuban Missile Crisis, and him bringing pictures in and showing everybody from the U-2 and from low-level pictures that were taken the day before. Hey, here's what the Russians are up to in Cuba. Shock the world. And I want you to think about it now. Our ability to collect that kind of photographic intelligence is on a scale that would be unbelievable in 1962. All right. Yeah, we still have the good old Dragon Lady still flying. All right. You know, and it was flying in the 60s. But now we have things, drones, that have long loiter times, better cameras, better electronic collection capability, the ability to send that information off board immediately through satellite to command centers all over the world. Very different from the Cuban Missile Crisis. So anyway, folks, yeah, X-31 spaceplane. I'd love to know what that thing's doing. How can someone have 200K subs and less than 20 live views? Seems odd. D-Life, because I just started doing lives just recently. Wayne, back me up on this. This is like only the 6th or 8th live that I've done. D-Life, I did one, believe it or not, from an airfield watching airplanes in an air show. So D-Life, the lives that you're watching here are relatively new. I started on TikTok. You know, I'll give you guys some background, okay? I started doing lives on TikTok. And then, as all of you know, TikTok became very unstable, shall we say. I was getting millions of views. I had one post about drones and Russian tanks that had 3.7 million views in 24 hours. 24 hours. Had 12.5 million views total. And all that's gone away. And as you know, there's now been some agreements made about TikTok in the United States. Will it improve the algorithm? Remains to be seen. I don't know. But my son, who is a terrific coach, and my wife, who is also a terrific coach, said, hey, maybe it's time to focus on YouTube. And I started doing that. And it was only a couple of months ago, D-Life, that my son said, Dad, start doing lives. And I got to be honest with you, D-Life, all of you, Michelle, Wayne, everybody. My first one was, I'm like a monkey with a football. I'm all over it, but, don't quite know what to do with it. And they've gotten a lot better. I think, there's so much going on. I've had a couple of friends of mine ask me, why aren't you doing this 3-4 times a week? Well, that's because I've got a job and I've got a family life, and I shouldn't say a job. I don't have a job, but I do the shorts and I do digital artwork too. I haven't figured out how I share a screen yet. I'd love to show you guys some of my digital artwork. You can see the KC-135 here behind my head. And that's one that I drew. That was my airplane 8874 when I was in Okinawa, Japan. But again, D-Life, I didn't know about live streaming on YouTube until just a couple months ago. Wayne, Michelle, it's been about, 3-4 months I've been doing this? Maybe 3 months. I have to go back and look at how many I've done. And again, I've been on the road a lot. 4 out of the last 5 weeks, I've been in a different city. Reno, Boston and Portsmouth, Washington, D.C., Atlanta, man. A squirrel on crack. Here's a funny story for you, Wayne. One of the B-2 planners at the Air Operations Center, his call sign was Squirrel. Of course, we had to ask him, how did you get that? And it had something to do with sometimes when he's talking, he's like darting around. Oh, I got to do this. Oh, I got to do this. I got to do this. I got to do this. Anyway, Squirrel. All right. Supreme Eater, thank you for that very kind and generous compliment. Excellent YouTube shorts with good music clips. I actually sit and I think about what piece of music can I add to this short. And recently I've spent a lot more time putting those shorts together. I kind of stitch them together in Adobe Premiere and put the music to them. And I actually spend a lot of time thinking, okay, what piece of music can I put in here? All right. And it was kind of a walk down memory lane because you know what I did? I went through the whole Miami Vice soundtracks. I don't know how many of you are out there, but that was, hey, Kincaid, welcome back. That was a program that I watched religiously. And I go back and I watch that now and I think, God, how hokey this is. But back in the 80s, when that show started, particularly when I was in college and then, in the Air Force on alert, never missed an episode. And it taught me a lesson because each episode of Miami Vice had some really, really cool music to it. And I was watching something the other day where Don Johnson said it was the most expensive series of its time period because of the clothes and the licensing of the music. He said that really drove the show. And of course, they had the script and everything like that. And like I said, you look at it now and you go, uh, I can't believe that I was so soaked into this thing, but I really was. All right. Not the drugs, Michelle. Um, yeah, Magnum PI. I wasn't a big Magnum PI guy like I was though for Miami Vice, again because the music from Peter Gabriel, all right, and Sheena Easton and all these different people, okay? Phil Collins, one of my favorite folks in music is Phil Collins. And unfortunately, folks, he's not doing really good. I don't know how much time he has left. He's been in the hospital for a while. Took a really bad fall and really hurt himself, okay? There was pictures of Paul McCartney visiting him, okay? But that music, okay, that they had with the show was kind of a learning experience for me when I started doing the shorts. I'm like going, hey, each episode of Miami Vice had some really incredible music in it from some really top-notch singers, songwriters, and composers. And so I said, okay, that's how I'm going to do my shorts too, is I'm going to find some of this really cool music. All right. When you're talking about an A-10 and the gun, what's the first piece of music that comes to your mind? I'll tell you what it was to my mind. Billy Idol, Don't Need a Gun. I have a short that had 9.5 million views, and I think it had Billy Idol in the background. I don't need a gun. Fortunate Son is another great one. Okay. Andrew, yeah, see, you and Michelle think alike. Oh, yeah, the cameos too. I mean, the cameos were incredible. Melanie Griffith was in one of them. There was, I mean, just a lot of people that showed up as bad guys in these things and good guys too. But I'll tell you, the one person that I loved in Miami Vice, I can't believe I'm not talking about airplanes here. The one person that I really enjoyed in Miami Vice was the lieutenant, Edward James Olmos. He was a spectacular actor for that role that he played as a lieutenant. And there's one episode where he's trying to protect these people from, I think it's called the Grabeskis. They were KGB people, okay? And he's got his sword, samurai sword, all right? Remind me, folks, and the next time we do this live Thursday night, I've showed you the 5-inch shell. I've showed you the 105 round, like that's here behind me. Where is it? Right there. Okay. When I was living in Japan for Father's Day, my wife surprised me. She bought me a 28-inch katana. It was a practice sword, and it's beautiful. Go and watch a video on how they create the blades for samurai swords. It's amazing. Folding the steel over and everything like that. All right. Give Me Shelter by the Stones. Yeah. I mean, think of all the songs that they played in Miami Vice. Okay. Michelle, she's not a good wife. She's a great wife. Great companion. I hope some of you guys get to meet her. Maybe one of these days I'll have her come and sit. Tell me if this is something you guys would be interested in. Would you be interested in having my wife come sit here and give the wife's perspective on what it's like being the spouse of a military member that has gone a lot and flies a lot? Yeah, only if she wanted to. I understand that. I might be able to talk her into it though, Michelle. Yeah, exactly, Wayne. Okay. I want you to all remember this. Typing it in right now. Sink House. She's actually in my phone as Sink House. Commander-in-Chief of House. When we had kids at home, it was diaper control in my phone. My wife is Sink House, and it even comes up on my phone, Sink House. It was diaper control when we had young kids. All right. Okay, folks, we've been going for an hour and 16 minutes. Let me ask you if you have any questions. Just type them down in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer them. My bottom line tonight, folks, is we are seeing a real page turn in military capabilities on the battlefield with 6th-gen fighters, a bomber that is being talked about being rolled as not only air to ground, but air to air, potentially air to air, and having a bunch of AI driven wingmen around it. And all of them operating as one cohesive piece with other aircraft that are doing the exact same thing. You know, a 4-ship of B-2 bombers, each of them with 6 these collaborative vehicles with them, okay? Wayne, you bring up a good point, hardened aircraft shelters. But you know what, Wayne? Go look up, I think it's the Joint Standoff Weapon, JSOW. I think it's called AGM-154. And the particular type of warhead that they're using in it. They're busting open bunkers now with a GPS glide bomb. We've used them for years, right? I mean, all the way back to certainly in the second Gulf War, and even before that, during Desert Fox, the JSOW. And that was one of the things at Top Gun, at Tailhook, I think I mentioned to you that they were literally being trained on these old weapons that they were getting rid of as they were walking out to the jet, that had those old weapons that they were getting rid of on the pylons. And I believe JSOW was one of them. Some of these weapons haven't quite outlived their usefulness yet. All right. Did you ever hear whispers about Constant Peg, the very secret program to train U.S. pilots against Russian fighters? Yes. You have to remember, I was at a base with 3 F-15 squadrons, all right? And I had a TS clearance, and every once in a while, one of the F-15 guys would go, you know, oh yeah, our trip up to the box. That's what they call it, or the container, all right? Area 51, because that's where they'd always fight, all right? And somebody told me, again, we were in our vault, said, well, there's this program where we fight bad guy airplanes, all right? And Supreme Eater, I have had a Red Eagle, as they call themselves, on my podcast. All right. Go look that episode up. It's really good. God, I just forgot his name. I can picture his face, can't remember his name. Anyway, his book will be coming out next year. His book is called American MiG Pilot. All right, let me put this in here so that you guys remember this. I want all of you, when this thing comes out, by Rob Zettel, aka Z-Man. I think it's got a March release, and he flew F4s at Osan, started at Kadena flying F4Ds, went to Osan flying F4Es, got picked up by the 26th Aggressor Squadron flying out of Clark, and was asked to come join the Red Eagle Squadron. And he talks about the exhaustive interview you have to go through to become a Red Eagle. And then he talked about he flew the MiG-21 and the MiG-23. And on the podcast, I can't remember which episode, he talks about what it was like, flying each one of those airplanes. And I remember one of the things that he told me was they would go wing to wing in the flogger, the MiG-23 with an F-15, and then push the power up. All right. And the flogger would literally walk away from an Eagle, walk away from it. He said it was crazy, crazy fast. The flogger was very fast, terrible in a dogfight. As soon as it turned, it bled off a lot of energy, and they just manhandle it. Flew they were earlier MiG-21s, and he said very maneuverable, very nimble, made for being at austere locations. Had some weird nose wheel steering that you use brakes for, to turn the airplane, which was kind of weird. But yeah, as you mentioned now, Wayne, people have taken pictures of those flankers, up over Area 51. As a matter of fact, there was one picture where it shows the F-15 and the flanker in a turning fight, which is pretty wild. Pretty wild. I met a B-17 pilot when I was at the Andrews Air Force Base show. He's 103. And he said to me some very fascinating facts about the B-24 versus the B-17. And he said the B-24, since it had a high wing and a relatively thick wing, it was not as maneuverable, couldn't get up as high, couldn't carry the bomb load a B-17 did. He didn't have a lot of good things to say about the B-24, Michelle, which I thought was very fascinating. But it was incredible to meet this guy. Flew, I think he said 75 missions. No, wait a minute. It wasn't 75. Flew like 36 missions and then got hurt and couldn't fly anymore. But, he flew B-17s and then continued flying after the war, and then finally got out and became like a lawyer or something like that. So really interesting talking to him. 103 years old. His mind not phased at all. He's in a wheelchair. Of course, he can't, hard time walking and getting up, but it was great. It was great to meet him. Folks, thanks for joining me tonight. Remember, Thursday night, same time, and we'll talk some more. I think Thursday night, I haven't listened to Secretary Hegseth's talk today. I understand there were some really good things that he said. Something about fat generals and admirals. Some really good stuff that he mentioned, but I haven't listened to it yet. And Thursday, we'll talk about that. The Chinese carrier that is now out doing ops, I want to talk about that. And our airplanes are getting intercepted a lot more by Chinese and by the Russians. How many of you have seen the video of the IL-238 that is literally like a quarter mile off the deck of the Vinson? I think it happened back in March. A lot of these things are happening now, so crazy stuff. Please subscribe. become a member of my All Ranks Club, and we will see you Thursday night. I appreciate that, Michelle. And Wayne, Super Eater, D Life, thanks for joining. Sluggo out here.